Mr. Seetharaman, first of all, thank you very much for coming back on Business Arabia. Let's start with a macro picture. We've seen some conflicting reports about the recovery, not just regionally, but globally as well. What's your take on that? What sort of recovery are you expecting?
Is the world has recovered? If you ask me, personally, professionally, I would say no. What has changed? The developed economies who are overstretched in terms of fiscal prudence have sought to quantitative easing, printing money supply, and clearly creating liquidity. That was the result in the stock market you're seeing. Too few stocks being chased by too much liquidity. World over, stock market has recovered. It is not macroeconomic intrinsic value definition. Number two, if you look at the currency throughout the crisis period in real order, currency was getting strengthened, dollar was getting strengthened. Now, once the regional recoveries are being tested, global recoveries are being contemplated with quantitative easing, now the currency getting weakened. What does it reflect? When the currency is getting weakened, the commodities are being resorted. That is, people hedge the risk by buying commodities. That is why the oil price, in addition to a marginal rise in demand, clearly that was a reflection in the commodity market. We have seen the same reflection in the gold as well, cutting across more than $1,100 per ounce. So commodity market is recovering because of currency depreciation. If you look at the real estate, still in real order, it has not recovered. We have seen US as third quarter results and clearly indicating the housing market slump is still on. The rest of the world has not recovered in real order, even in the real estate sector. So conceptually, the world at large will recover, only will recover if the G20 decisions, whatever the decisions we have taken in terms of regulatory realignment, integration of the regulators, hedge fund companies needs to be measured and managed and controlled. Tax havens should be put to test, and we need much closer regulatory framework for tax havens so that tax evasion is avoided. So conceptually, all these decisions taken in the Pittsburgh and London needs to be implemented. It will take 15 to 18 months. Then the world will recover. Till then, it's only a hype. It's only a cautious optimism. People are throwing multiple messages. World has not recovered in true intrinsic strength.
Mr. Seetharaman, you just mentioned regulatory realignment. What sort of new regulations or what sort of a new reality in terms of regulations do you think are needed in the GCC moving forward?
Conceptually, we have to necessarily look at the Basel II itself, realignment. We started in 2006. We need to look at the liquidity factoring into the Basel II framework. Operation risk has to be fine-tuned again. Credit risk needs realignment when it comes to cross-border confederation. Clearly, when it comes to liquidity management, we need to set in measures which are realigned to the regional regulators. We have different regulatory framework for different states within the GCC itself, Gulf states itself. So if you look at the Gulf monetary union, convergence will not come unless regulatory refinements, uniformity comes in. Long-term prosperity is depending upon the sustainable, the unified, the position of the regulator in regional terms. That will come. It means you have to necessarily realign the capital adequacy norms. You have to look at the risk reserves. Clearly, now the transaction tax is what Gordon Brown was mentioning in the G20 meeting. Clearly, in Scotland, a couple of days before, what we need to articulate is creating a risk reserves so that shareholders are not over-benefiting. At the same time, the public at large is not under stress when it comes to bankruptcy of the financial institutions or when the institution is under stress. So you need to strike a balancing act. So conserve the resources, increase the capital, and make sure regulatory alignment comes in all perspectives so that you have a good monetary union in the making.
Zooming into Qatar, where of course you are based as the CEO of Doha Bank, how are loan-to-deposit ratios and how is capital adequacy ratios at Qatari banks right now?
Qatari banks have been very well supported by the government and the central bank. We have seen capital introduction to start with last year. We have 10% commitment came from the government. Qatar investment authorities have taken 5% and another 5% is coming by end of this year. Again, when the stock market was depleting because the hedge fund holders who came to this local market, when the home market was drying up, they were running away. Essentially, the market, purely due to sentiments, was regressing. That's the time investment bailout to the tune of $1.8 billion was pumped by the government. that has improved the risk profile, improved the capital adequacy, improved the profitability. Again, we all know real estate is a major issue we need to resolve. Conceptually, when the stress test was done by the central bank and clearly revealed that we need to, distressed assets should be passed on to the government. Government has put in again $4.12 billion. So essentially this is a public-private partnership models has really improved the capital adequacy. To answer your question, capital adequacy is ranging around 15 to 15.5% en bloc. Clearly the liquidity is there. At the same time the cost of fund is prohibitively expensive because of the interest arbitrage is taking place between the states, between the markets as such. This is a huge capital flow in and out. It's distressing the cost of funds. At the same time, the banks have reported good profit. If you look at all the banks have reported profit in response to the current situations. Compared to the rest of the states, it has been a good response. Some banks like Doha Bank or QNB has reported better profit than last year. So all around, if you look at it, it's a good journey.
How big of a problem or how much are provisions weighing down on these profits? According to a figure that I saw on the website of the Qatari Central Bank, loan loss provisions in the sector increased 8% between July and September. Do you think that figure might increase further going forward?
Well, we have to look at the market risk as well as sectoral risk. Whether it is consumer lending or car loans, we have the demographic structure within the local and regional definition consists of expatriate as well. There were some dropouts on the expatriate side. And clearly, the real estate sector has taken the doldrum. And it is better to be cautious. That's what the situation is all about. And asset quality needs to be improved as well for the sake of international benchmarks. Best practice is to measure the risk, manage the risk, control the risk. When the going is good, tough gets going. And that's the reason why I think the banks are cautious in building the provisions. It's a good habit as well.
Let's talk about Doha Bank. If we look at your third quarter results, you posted a 19% drop in net profit over the same quarter last year, if I'm not mistaken. Your profits came to about $56 million US. What were the reasons behind this drop?
Conceptually, our operating profit has gone up, if you look at last year, almost 17%. The net profit has come down purely because of new players, new cost structures, erosion of margin. As I said, the cost of fund is moving up. The net interest margin is coming down. Again, we have also